What's up, Spurs Nation? Welcome back. Today I have a very special guest, Rafael Barlowe. He is awesome with draft content, great at scouting these college players, international players, one of my favorite YouTube channels right now. He definitely knows what he's talking about. How are you doing, man?
Man, I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course, yeah. I mean, like I said, I saw your channel, immediately fell in love with that content, really high quality stuff. Clearly, you know what you're talking about. And, Spurs fans are excited right now. It's our, first lottery pick in more than 2 decades. Kind of unfortunate because it's kind of perceived to be a weaker draft class. But there's still reason to be excited. There's some solid players in the class who probably can come in and help. And, I asked Spurs fans on Twitter and on Pounding the Rock, who do you want to know more about? So they sent me in a bunch of guys. So we'll start off with Tyrell Terry. What are your opinions on him? What do you think about him?
I like him a lot. I think that immediately you're going to start seeing comparisons to like a poor man's Trae Young or Steph Curry. Not saying that he's that type of player,
Sure,
but there are some comparisons. The way he shoots, he plays with that same type of swagger and confidence. Definitely confident in his ability to shoot the ball. Has a little bit of creativity and handle. And what I liked about him was he was so skinny, but he was still aggressive in attacking the rim. I think he might have weighed probably like, I don't know, 155, 160 pounds. And he came out of nowhere. Like, I'll be honest, I had never heard of him until this year. And I think like I do a pretty decent job of following like, the guys that are projected to be drafted and like AAU basketball.
sure, yeah.
But he came out of nowhere. Like, I can't think of a draft board that had him projected as a first round pick at this time last year. And so I'm guessing that he kind of has this underdog mentality, because you got to think about it. Like, last year at this time, everybody thought Nico Mannion, Cole Anthony,
Sure, yeah.
Theo Maledon, um, all these guards. And just the fact that his name is mentioned with those guys now, it's just a testament to his work ethic and how, like, it's hard to predict, like, where guys, how guys respond to college basketball. And so a lot of the scouts were totally wrong because he's, without a doubt, his name should be mentioned with those guys.
Yeah, and scouting really, there's a talent to it, right? You got to be able to identify that talent. You got to be able to watch tape and kind of move the hype to the side, because with a lot of these kids who are coming out of high school, it's like there's so much hype around them. They get called unicorns, or they're this generational talent, and then they get to the league, or maybe they get to college and they get maybe a little bit exposed, or it maybe not even exposed, but it's like the reality comes out that generational players are just that. They are once in a generation. Not every guy's generational. And he's one of those guys, you're right, who I did not know who he was a year ago. And he shot up and his stock has skyrocketed. Now, I have one more question for you about him. So some Spurs fans have asked me and made this comment. They're like, oh, well, he's just like another Bryn Forbes. He's a Bryn Forbes clone. And to me, he is not that. Bryn Forbes isn't a creator. He's not really a ball handler. He's pretty much just a pure shooter, doesn't bring anything on the defensive end. Love him, hard work ethic kind of guy, great guy, but he's probably gone this offseason. So for fans who are saying that and who are maybe worried that, the Spurs, if they draft him, that's what they're going to get. In your opinion, in my opinion, I don't think that's true, but what is your opinion about that take?
I agree with both sides in a sense. I think it can be somewhat of a lazy comparison visually, because you can say they, may favor a little bit. I can see him, if he does end up having a role as a Brent Forbes type player, I wouldn't be shocked by that. But I also wouldn't be shocked that if a team gives him some ball handling responsibilities and allows him to create. So only time will tell. But I wouldn't be shocked, to be honest with you, either way. I think he probably does have a little bit more skill set that he can bring to the table. But he's such a player that thrives off of freedom. And he's going to need to go to a situation where he can take those bad shots, because he's a really confident guy. And I think if you kind of put him in a box, you kind of limit his maximum potential. but I like what he brings to the table. I it's interesting because where the Spurs are picking, I don't know if he will be available at either spot unless you reach up to take him pretty high. I don't think he'll be available in the second round. I have him as a first round pick. But if Forbes is gone and there's a situation where the Spurs trade up, I think he would be a pretty good replacement.
Yeah, I agree. I also believe, for me, and I'm not sure how you feel about it, but I wrote about it last week. One-dimensional players, and especially one-dimensional shooters who are just shooters, only have so much value unless you're like a generational shooter like a JJ Redick or a Duncan Robinson, where your gravity is so much that defenses have to respect you no matter where you are on the court, and you also may have the ability to put the ball on the floor a little bit. And Bryn Forbes really is just that. And just for that reason, I like Tyrell Terry. I think he has the potential to be much better than Bryn Forbes. I don't think he's a great fit for San Antonio. Not that you necessarily would be drafting for fit at 11. But I think it would behoove them to not really take him that early. And if they do want him, like you said, maybe trade down, away from 11 or trade up from 41. And which leads me to the next guy, Kira Lewis Jr. He's a guy who I've been really intrigued with. I didn't get to watch as much of his basketball games as I wanted to. And I wanted the opinion from somebody who probably has seen quite a bit of him. I think he gives teams a reason to be excited, and maybe not, that 1, 2, 3 top point guard in this class, but I still think he is a very special player in his own right. What is your opinion of him?
Really high on him. He's so young for his class.
Yeah.
I mean, like I had mentioned before that I was at the under 19 tournament last summer in Greece, and he was on that team. But some of his teammates are just entering their freshman year of college. So he just finished his sophomore season. He's probably younger than some of the guys that were freshmen. And I think that if he would have been one of these guys that were held back, or he was like a 19-year-old high school senior, I think his stock would be a little bit different. He was pretty highly recruited coming out of high school, but I think if he would have been one of those guys that was like a year behind, you would have saw his name mentioned as, like the number 1 point guard, number 2 point guard in his class. What I like about him with the Spurs is, and I know this is kind of like a comparison that can get me in trouble,
sure,
but I see like some Tony Parker in him, in the sense that Tony Parker wasn't like this great passer that had like awesome court vision, but his speed put so much pressure on defenses that once he got in the paint, he was able to hit the corner man and then pick up all the hockey assists. Now, Tony Parker's the most underrated finisher in NBA history, in my opinion. The fact that he was the only guy that I remember that would constantly finish on Shaq. I'm not expecting Lewis to have that type of finishing ability. And just off subject, I remember I had a friend that played in the NBA, and I was like, what makes Tony Parker so good other than his speed? And how does he finish? He's like, man, that dude is so strong. He was like, his core, he said he doesn't look strong. He doesn't have, like definition in his arms, but he's like, with him and Manu, once they make contact with you, you couldn't do anything about it. And so, and then you look at a guy like Kawhi, who ended up being like super strong. So I think if the Spurs drafted like Lewis at number 11, they could like develop him into like a Tony Parker clone in a sense, because he's already pretty thin, but he'll get stronger, and speed kills. And then, I look at like Parker, he was able to get to the rack when the NBA didn't have this type of floor spacing. Now the Spurs were, I guess ahead of the game as far as like having a bunch of shooters and playing like 4 out. But I think in this type of NBA with Lewis's speed, I would not be shocked to see him go to San Antonio and end up being like this great steal, because like I said, speed kills. And the Spurs system, they believe in the extra pass, so he doesn't have to be like this great, point guard with court vision. But as long as he get into the paint and he can kick it to the corner, the hockey assist, and he'll just create so much havoc, just with his speed. So I would love to see him in San Antonio.
Yeah, he's a guy, again, so fast. And I'm not like, again, I don't want to compare him to like a guy in the NBA now, because I feel like it's easy to get carried away with comparisons, but he has that like kind of
Mhm.
De'Aaron Fox speed where
Fox.
he
Yep.
just breaks you down because he is so quick. It's so hard to keep track of him, and he puts so much pressure on defenses. And one of the other things I really liked was he, to me, at least from what I've been able to see, he has a pretty good shooting touch. He has a little bit of
Yep.
a floater game there as well. I enjoyed watching what I saw of him, and I wouldn't be opposed to the Spurs taking him at 11. I know a lot of fans would because they have, they have a DeJounte Murray, they have a Derek White. And one of the things that I like to tell fans is, until you have that franchise player, you don't necessarily need to be drafting to build around these guys who may not be that. I love DeJounte Murray. Really great defender, not a particularly good facilitator. He's an all right shooter. He's become a really great mid-range shooter off the bounce, which is useful in some senses. But I think they could do better, and I wouldn't mind them moving on from DeJounte. I wouldn't mind them trying to make it work with 3 different guards. See who ends up panning out. And for that reason, I think Kyra Lewis is an intriguing option at 11. I know some people think it might be a reach. I don't really think so. But this next guy who I want to talk about, Theo Maledon, he's somebody who I was actually kind of surprised that he kind of fell as the year went on. And I wasn't really sure why he continued to fall, other than there were so many risers at the point guard position. What do you think of Theo Maledon? And is he someone? I don't think he will be there in the second round, but is he someone who you could see being effective as a starting point guard in the NBA, or is he just a kind of a backup sort of guy?
Well, one, it's also could be a lazy comparison. He's French and he plays for Tony Parker's team.
Yeah.
So there is there's a connection there that you can't ignore. I think the reason why his stock fell a little bit is because he just dealt with some injuries. And, the Euro League is tough. I don't think Americans understand how the Euro League is actually tougher than college basketball, in my opinion. I
I
spent the
agree.
year um, in 2016-17 with Fenerbahce, and that was the year they won the Euro League. And I had a chance to watch, Luka when he was 17 years old. I saw Bogdanovich play. He was on the team. I was around every day, and I just had a really big appreciation for the Euro League. So even though his team won the Euro Cup the year before, it was a big bump in competition going to the Euro League. And so, like I said, he dealt with some injuries, and a lot of people don't understand that it's tougher to play in the Euro League as a teenager than it is to play as a teenager in NBA. And the reason I say this is because in the NBA, if you're drafted as a teenager, which most guys are, the general manager is going to put you in position to succeed. And teams are usually rebuilding. In Europe, there's no draft. There's no reward for losing. So every team has pressure to win. And then on a team like Azov, if I'm not mistaken, if they would have finished a certain place in the EuroLeague, then they would have been out and then they would have been demoted. So there's pressure every game, and there's not really time to like develop guys on the fly. So if you are his age and you're playing in the EuroLeague, is because you earn your minutes and you were better than another player. While we see it all the time in the NBA, there's guys that are, teenagers that are not better than somebody that they're playing minutes in, but a team that's a lottery bound team is going to play their first round pick over a 32-year-old vet.
Yeah.
And so I said all that to say this: the fact that he was playing it says a lot, because if you look at like the young guys that played in the Euro League that came from Europe, the ones that actually played in Europe, and I mean as far as like played in the Euro League, do well, as opposed to the guys that were on a Euro League team. They were like the last man on the bench, but they were drafted based off of their play in the juniors. And so I think that's why you see Luka doing so well, because he actually was, playing a pretty high role. So I think Maledon will be fine in that opinion. I don't think that he's an engine, for example. I think that he's more so of a game manager, a guy that can play multiple positions. I think he'll be able to knock down open shots. He's advanced in the pick and roll. So yeah, I think it could be a reach at number 11. Like you said, so many other guys were risers, which contributed to him falling on some, mock drafts. We don't really know what's going on with NBA teams and that because they kind of keep that to themselves. But I also wouldn't be shocked to see him go to number 11 because, again, he's young. And there is a connection with Tony Parker that you cannot ignore.
There is. And, actually a few years back, I want to say 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, they drafted a guy who was on Tony Parker's team that he owned, Olivier Jean-Charles, who I'm actually not really sure what's happened to him since then. I know he went back and he played in France for a while. I don't know where he is now, but he didn't work out. He's kind of had an outdated style of play, and I don't really think that's something that fans should worry about with Theo Maledon. I know that they saw him, they went, oh, he plays for Parker's team. If they pick him, it's because of Parker. And maybe there's some truth to that. Like, Tony may say, hey, this guy's really good, but I think they've heard that story from Tony before. And they always do. To me, the Spurs are one of the best organizations at doing their due diligence with prospects. They evaluate them really, really well, and they make the most of what they get. He, again, another guy who I wouldn't want them to take at 11. I do think it would be a little bit of a reach. But this next guy, who I know a lot of people also aren't super high on, I actually like him quite a bit. I saw him play in high school actually a lot when he was at Little Elm High School, RJ Hampton. While I was in college, he was going through the high school ranks, and I just happened to be out here. I got to see a lot of him, and in person, he impressed me. I did think he's a little bit immature, but I think a year abroad playing kind of a backup role probably humbled him a little bit. But what entices me is his upside. I think he has a fair amount of upside. Do you think it's fair to say RJ Hampton is one of the more high ceiling, maybe low floor players in this draft class at his position?
Yes. Before I get into that, I wanted to add something about the Maledon and Parker comparison. So I got a pretty cool story. So
go for it.
I spent last basketball season in Beijing, right? So a friend of mine played for the Beijing Ducks, and I spent some time out there doing video projects and training him. And then I also wanted to, just kind of know basketball in China. So at the time, so it was around, give or take a few weeks around this time, maybe like September, and the World Cup was going on. And so once the USA team lost, like a lot of the people that were supposed to come from America to go to the games ended up staying in the States. So I ended up getting courtside seats, and I sat next to Tony Parker. So
that's cool.
I mean, the game was pretty much empty because a lot of the, VIPs didn't come. So he was maybe like 2 or 3 seats down from me. But there are some pictures online where, they were taking pictures of him and I'm in the background sitting next to him. So I got a chance to talk to him briefly. And I was asking him about, he was cool, really cool. He was saying that he still is going to live in San Antonio and he's going to go back and forth. And I was asking him about Maledon. He was like, this kid is good. And it did seem like it's one of those things where he was biased because, of the connection. He was like, this kid is going to be special. I really like him a lot. And so I think that he's someone that's probably going to work out with Parker. And if, he ends up going to San Antonio, I think you'll see Parker definitely like be really hands-on with him as far as like developing him and, giving him the, just kind of teaching him the nuances of the game and making his adjustment, because he's going to be a teenager adjusting to a whole different country and lifestyle and all that. But I think Tony would be there to make his adjustment easier. Because at the time, I didn't realize that Tony was actually still going to stay and live in the States. So again, I think there's a very, very strong connection and possibility that the Spurs take him at number 11.
Yeah, I could.
Now, as far as
I could see that. I could really see that happening. And I think it would be great for them to have him there because Tony went through that exact same transition, a teenager coming to the NBA. I mean, obviously it was a different, era of basketball, I guess, if you want to call it that. But, they play the same position. They're roughly, similar sizes, I guess. And they're both French. They're going through the same kind of thing, I suppose. So, and if he lives in San Antonio, we know that he is spoken to Lonnie Walker. He's been sort of a mentor for Lonnie Walker here the last year. Mm-hmm. And I could see him being hands-on, even more hands-on with a guy like Theo Maledon. So that's cool. But go ahead. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no problem. As far as RJ, I've had a chance to watch RJ work out this summer a couple of times. He's working out like literally 10 minutes from my house. I do believe that going to New Zealand was very good for him. I think it hurt his stock some. because he was playing a different role. But he's one of the few guys in this draft that I feel like was a high volume scorer in high school and then had to learn how to play a role, as opposed to some of the guys they went to college like Anthony Edwards. He played the same role. Cole Anthony ended up playing the same role. LaMelo ended up playing the same role with a bunch of freedom. And I think their adjustment to having better teammates and having to play in structure, I think is going to be possibly a steep climb. I feel like RJ had a chance to experience that playing in New Zealand. I actually had a chance to go out there. I went to the first game where him and LaMelo, they competed against each other. So
Yeah.
I was at that game, and I was somewhat impressed with RJ because, like I said, when I saw him in high school, he was bigger, stronger, faster than everybody else.
Yeah, for sure.
He put his head down. He got to the rim every single play. If he didn't score, he got fouled. I mean, I remember going to games, I'm like, this is boring because he scored 35 points, but he shot 15 free throws. And he never really had to work on his jump shot in a sense because his first step is lethal, and he could always get to the rim on the high school level. So he struggled a lot with his shooting in New Zealand because he had to play off the ball, and it was just a different role for him. And so I set out to say this, that when he came back, he knew that he really needed to put in the time and work on his jump shot. He's changed his form a little bit. His elbow used to be out. His elbow's in now. His balance on catch and shoot is a lot different. I have a video on my YouTube channel where I spent the day, and he mostly did spot up shooting. It wasn't a lot of off the dribble stuff, but it was I just happened to come in on the day where they were working on repetition on spot up shooting, and he shot the cover off the ball. I mean, if you go to my YouTube channel, you can type in NBA Draft Junkies, and you'll see that video. I probably put it up maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so for him, his shooting is that's the one skill set that he needs to improve that will unlock everything else that he brings to the table. But he has good size, like I said, good first step, very athletic. I think on one of my previous mock drafts, I had him going to the Spurs because I thought he was a guy that could, do the same things that I mentioned Lewis could do. You give him a screen, he gets into the paint, collapses the defense. And RJ is a really good passer as far as like skip passes and getting it to the corner. And I thought like he would be a guy that I could see the Spurs kind of developing and turning into the guy that fits their system. I honestly feel like DeRozan doesn't really fit Pop's system. I feel like he was kind of forced there in a sense because of the whole Kawhi trade. And if he stays, or I mean, it's up in the air. I thought Pop made the most of that situation, especially like later this year. But I think if he ends up leaving, I think you're going to start seeing like more so of a true Popovich offense where, you don't have two guys like DeRozan and Aldridge that like the ball in the same spots.
Yeah.
And I thought like I could see San Antonio drafting a guy with speed that can collapse the defense so they can swing the ball and get open looks again.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think one of the last questions I had for you about RJ Hampton, I wrote about him because I've watched a bunch of his games when he was over in New Zealand, and I watched a bunch of his games in high school. And one of the things I noticed, and you can tell me since you've seen him recently, I have not. I noticed his feet are kind of close together when he shoots, especially like on catch and shoot. Is that something that when you were watching, has he kind of improved that? Because I think it just to me seemed like his feet were very close together. But is that something that you thought he improved on?
Yeah, that's one of the things. Even when I like filmed the video, I didn't film it to make a highlight tape, right? So I filmed it to show what, like your question, has these questions been answered? So yeah, his form is different, but he has a wider base. And one of the things that has helped him out is he rotates. Like 1 week he's in Dallas working out with a guy named Tyler Ralph. Tyler's a very good trainer who's worked with a lot of pre-draft guys, NBA guys. And then the next week he goes to Memphis and he's working with Mike Miller and Penny Hardaway.
I saw that.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I hopefully, I know I was planning to go out there one day to just kind of film that workout to add the content to my site. But now with this whole situation where I think this pre-draft virtual combine thing has kind of made it a little tougher. Or I guess whatever week the team does it, they're going to send personnel out to the player's home city. So I think he's going to do his stuff in Dallas. And so, but I don't know. I think before the draft, I'll be able to get another workout with him and just kind of show his progression. Maybe this week. I talked to his dad a couple of days ago, so there's a possibility. But yeah, he's definitely worked on his balance. Having Mike Miller, one of the best shooters in history, as your shooting coach definitely helps out a lot. And I think they built their relationship when Memphis was recruiting RJ to go to University of Memphis, and Mike Miller was on staff as the assistant, which I think he's now coaching high school basketball instead. He's not really doing a college thing anymore. But yeah, they kept the relationship. And like I said, for him to be able to learn like the point guard game from Penny, the shooting from, Mike Miller, and then while he's here, he's working with Tyler. I think the sky's the limit. I think he's someone whose stock may start rising within the next few weeks, back to where it was projected to be going into the season before he went to Australia and New Zealand. So, but yeah, like I said, I think his stock could end up rising because he's a good kid. I think he'll do really well on the interviews, and he has a good, strong support system. But the thing that I really noticed about him is, and I can say this because I've kind of been around, is he works. Like he has a really, really strong work ethic. And I think part of that is, due to his own inner drive, but the fact that he's, was projected as a top 5 to 10 pick this time last year, seeing his name drop on different draft boards, seeing guys that he feels like he's better than ranked ahead of him. And I think that is part of his motivation he's had an extra fuel to his motivation because he's already self-motivated. So I think, whatever team drafts him is going to get a really good kid with a strong work ethic, but he has a really strong family support system around him.
Yeah. And he's, I said earlier that when he was in high school, he came off like as a little bit immature. I think that's a lot of high school kids. I think a year abroad, even just like a year, even if he hadn't spent it abroad in college, everybody matures a little bit. They grow as people. Nothing's just going to be static forever. And I never thought he was like a bad kid or anything like that. Kids just tend to be immature. That's what happens. But you said his work ethic was really great. That's something that you want to hear. I mean, that's just something you want to hear about, a player who you are investing a high lottery pick in, or any lottery pick in. And I think it would be nice to see the San Antonio Spurs draft somebody with a high upside because, again, they have done so well with so many different players. I think you get a guy with such high upside, the sky's the limit. And I know a lot of Spurs fans don't necessarily want to see him come to San Antonio. I would be thrilled to see him go there. And I would be equally thrilled to see this next guy. So we're moving on to forwards, Isaac Okoro. I like him a lot. I see a lot of Jimmy Butler comparisons. I think that's entirely unfair. But is he someone who you think will continue to grow and can potentially be like an all-star, fringe all-star level player once he gets a few years in the NBA? Or is he somebody who you think is probably just a really good role player, hustle guy, plays tough defense, can maybe, if his shot comes along, knock down an open shot? Because that's one of the concerns for me is his shot. But is he someone who you think, will be able to reach the ceiling that some people have placed upon him?
I mean, you know what? That's tough. I think if he goes to San Antonio, I think the opportunity, the chances of him reaching that max ceiling are pretty high. I think he'll get the unfair Kawhi comparisons.
Yep.
And
they already
then
with Keldon Johnson. I don't know how people are doing it with Keldon Johnson already, but fans are already doing it with Keldon.
Wow. And I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that because to me they were like totally different players. But I think with the Okoro comparisons, it kind of makes sense to me because coming in, nobody ever thought Kawhi was going to develop into a shooter. He was known as like this undersized, great rebounding power forward. I didn't see like a lot of, like ball handling ability at San Diego State. And I think Okoro is a better like ball handler and playmaker at the same state. So I think he can develop into a secondary ball handler guy that you can run pick and rolls for. I think he has decent passing instincts and feel for the game. But if he doesn't develop as a shooter, then his pick and roll ball handling and, because teams are just going to go under the screens and, he won't be able to unlock his gifts until he improves as a shooter. Is Chip England still on the staff?
He is, yeah. He's still one of the assistants for them. He's the legendary shooting coach, Chip England. Yeah. All fans in San Antonio know his name, and I'm sure everybody around the NBA community knows him. Legendary guy.
Oh. Well, if he's still on the staff and if he can work another miracle, then you have an all-star on your team, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, I think that if he's available for San Antonio, I definitely think that he is someone that you can't pass up just because he already has what you can't teach. He already has an NBA-ready body. Yeah. He has the motor to defend, the want to defend, and he has a good baseline of skills to work with. If you can just gradually turn him into a good shooter, then he's going to be tough just because he's going to make your defense better and he's going to be able to, just kind of, like I said, make your defense better and just give you those extra possessions. He plays hard. And to me, I feel like, Pop always says the Spurs draft guys who are over themselves, guys who aren't really into, the extra stuff. And usually you don't see a guy that defends like that is into the extra stuff. Usually these guys that defend want to do all the dirty work. They don't care about being famous. They don't care about being stars. They just want to go out and play. So he does have like a Spurs type vibe to him.
Sure. Yeah, no, I completely agree. He's another one of those guys who I wrote a breakdown on. I'm really high on Okoro. I don't think he'll be there at 11. But Patrick Williams, he'll be our next guy because I think there might be a strong chance that he's there at 11. A lot of people are higher on him than I am. For me, he's one of those guys who does have an intriguing skill set, somebody who can be a 3-and-D forward. But for me, it's when I look at him, I'm thinking like, are these skills that we were saying he's good at, are they actually, more theoretical than they are like tangible at the moment? And if he's drafted at 11, a lot of people are probably going to expect him to contribute in a big way right away. And I don't necessarily know that that's going to happen with a guy like Patrick Williams. I like him. I'm not super high on him. I don't really love him at 11, but I also wouldn't be upset. Do you think he is somebody worth taking at 11? And if you do, why?
You know what? I want to go back to what you said. Like he didn't like kind of wow you when you first saw him. I had the same impressions. Last summer, came to Dallas for like a week and he worked out and I saw him every day. And, somebody was saying like, he's a first round pick. And I didn't see it. I said, first round? They was like, yes, he's going to be a first round pick. At the worst, he goes in the teens. They were like, look at his body, look at his size, like, look at his age. I think at the time he was only 17. He hadn't turned 18 yet. And they were like, he's one and done. But I couldn't watch him work out and play and see like, what is this one thing that he does well? You can't really determine defense and just kind of work out drills. I thought he shot the ball okay. I didn't see like a crazy handle. I didn't see like crazy like offensive creativity. And then as the season went on, I started to see, okay, he does have the size. He's a switchy defender. He should be able to defend multiple positions. He's not a great shooter at this point, but you can see like, okay, it shouldn't take too long for him to develop into a respectable shooter. Then you saw he can put the ball on the floor a little bit, shoot the pull-up jumper. He's active and he's athletic. And so it's just one of those things where he's not going to wow you. I think that he's going to be a really good complementary player, a guy that, will help a winning team, like a good role player on a winning team. On one hand, a lot of times you think with a lottery pick, you want to swing for the fences and try to get a superstar. I personally don't really see superstar potential in him, but he's another guy that I've seen people compare to Kawhi, saying if he goes to San Antonio, then, they kind of have like a similar body type. He's already pretty strong for his, to be so young. Then I've heard people say that he's a better shooter at this same stage than Kawhi. If you develop him into a a highly efficient 3-point shooter. I don't know. So it's tough because, like you said, he's not gonna wow you watching his film. And then it didn't help that he was coming off the bench at Florida State and he didn't play a lot of minutes. And so yeah, it's tough to predict. But one of the things I do like is obviously the body, the baseline of skills, and then he's so young. I want to say he's at least one of the youngest players in the draft. I think
Yeah.
Pokusevski is the youngest. He may be second or third in his draft as far as like age wise.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I wouldn't be upset if the Spurs took him at 11. He's just not a guy who, like you said, doesn't really wow you when you watch him. I think he will be like you said, a really good complementary player. And I think some fans might be upset about that. But I think when you look at this class and where the Spurs are picking at 11, you can't really be upset if that's all that, Patrick Williams ends up becoming. And somebody who you just mentioned, Aleksej Pokusevski, talking about swinging for fences. To me, he's a really high risk, high reward player, but I think he's legitimately skilled, and I think he does have some legitimate guard skills. And I don't want people to think he's going to come in and be like crossing guys up and firing, no look passes or, shooting 40% from three. I think it's going to be more of a long-term project than an immediate impact. And while that may scare some Spurs fans, I think if he's available at 11, and again, another guy I don't really think will be there, but if he is, I think it would be worth swinging for the fences on that guy, because if you're a team like the San Antonio Spurs, you don't have a superstar. That's what you're looking for. I mean, DeMar DeRozan's a fine player. LaMarcus Aldridge is all right as far as, I guess, what he brings to the table. But they're not guys you can build around. We saw the Spurs make a 7th seed with both of them last year. They had, another year they aged, and the production wasn't really there for LaMarcus like it was for DeMar, and they miss out on the playoffs. And so with Pokusevski, I think you have somebody who has a ton of upside. Now, what is his realistic ceiling? And I know it's probably hard to gauge because he is a guy who, even if you do get the tape on him, it's hard to gauge because he's not playing in a top league. He's playing with like the second tier team, and he had so much freedom pretty much to do whatever he wanted there. What do you think is his ceiling? Because I like him, but it's hard to tell sometimes.
Well, I have a unique perspective on him because I actually got a chance to watch him live. So when I went to I get them mixed up because last year they had the under 19s and under 18s in Greece, and they were like weeks apart. And I was fortunate enough to be able to go to both. Greece is not a bad place to spend, 2 weeks out of a month in the summertime. So he was in the under 18s, and I watched him live maybe 4 or 5 games. And I've said this on like previous podcasts on my channel. The first game put him on the map. He had like a triple-double, close to quadruple-double. He showed his whole skill set. He showed that he could rebound, push the ball up the court. He's a natural wing in a sense. He has the size of a big. He's 7 foot, but the way he moves, handles the ball, his court vision, all of that is nothing but point guard, wing skill set. And then defensively, he's a good shot blocker. He gets steals. And so after that game, it's like, and I was kind of like the big coming out party for him because I never had heard of him at that point. After that, I made sure I went to every game that he played in his tournament, and it was just like downhill from there. And he showed flashes of the skills, and then he kind of like floated, disappeared. And then the part that kind of soured me on him was it was the game against Germany. And Germany has a guy named Ariel Porty. I can't pronounce his name, but he's projected to be a first-round pick in next year's draft. He actually won MVP at the Basketball Without Borders in Chicago All-Star Weekend.
Okay.
Because I had a chance to go to that. So to me, it's like, all right, this is a good matchup. This is a matchup with 2 guys that I think are potential NBA players and 2 of the best bigs in this age group in Europe. Pokusevski was 0 for 5 in the first 6 minutes, and he never came back in the game. After the timeout, he didn't enter the game again. He looked fine. There was no signs of an injury. He didn't have like ice on his ankle, knee, shoulder. And I couldn't tell if they got to, somebody send a message like, we don't want to hurt his draft stock because at this point it's high. I don't know. It was just so confusing to me. And then he didn't play the next game, but I didn't see any injury. So it was kind of like a disappointing. Like, he started off so high and then it just kind of went downhill from there. He showed flashes of what he can do. I mean, you can't help but be intrigued by the skill set and the size, the potential as a shooter. But my questions about him are his toughness.
Sure.
Obviously, he's rail thin. I don't think that he's ready to come in and compete anytime soon. Another question I have is he's so young. Like, I think he just barely made the deadline to be eligible for this year's draft. It was literally
like, I think by like 10 or so days. Like he's not even 19 yet. He's still 18.
Yeah, he's not 19. Yep. Like I had told somebody, there's guys that are like juniors in high school that are just as old as he is. And so I wonder, like, all right, if you put him, let's say you drafted him right now as a lottery pick, first round pick, whatever, and then you put him in the G League next year, not even on the NBA team, you put him in the G League and you say you want to develop him. I don't know how he would play in that situation because, the G League is a bunch of guys that are 22, 23, guys that play 4 years in college, guys that are hungry and they're trying to make it. And I worked in the G League. I worked for the Texas Legends for maybe like their first 3 or 4 seasons. So I have plenty of experience of how it works in the G League. And he would be hunted. He would be a guy that, the players would circle, okay, well, I know the Spurs are going to be paying attention to their guy. And I think he would struggle just because of the physicality and, just that whole toughness thing. But he's so skilled, 7-footers that can handle the ball, shoot, pass, dribble, defend, don't grow on trees. I just think a team would have to be patient with him. And since this is a Spurs show, I am a big fan of the Spurs developmental program. I mean, just by me like working in the G League, and it's been a while. I think the last season I worked in the G League was maybe 2013-14. But I used to see, at the time, the Legends and they were the Toros.
Yeah.
They played because of proximity and, the way the schedules before, like they've put a lot of money. Like we used to play Austin, I feel like every other week, and so we played them so much. But I was always a fan of like how they develop guys. I mean, whether it's like the coaching staff, the video guy, everybody was developed. And so I think that in a normal year, like if it was in a normal year, the Spurs aren't in the lottery.
Sure.
But I think that if the Spurs weren't trying to get back into the playoffs soon, I think that you take your time and you're patient with him and you develop him. And are they still in Austin?
They are.
No, they just changed the name to the Spurs.
Right,
they're no longer the Toros. But yeah, I think with the proximity there, you can develop him. You can help him get stronger. I don't really know what the Spurs' plan is. I personally think that they should just rebuild.
Yeah.
I don't think that they should keep, fighting into this no man's land and being in the 8th spot. But Pop doesn't strike me as a guy that wants to rebuild. But in my opinion, if they were to rebuild, then I'm taking him. I'm sending him to Austin, letting him get stronger. And hopefully in 3 years, he'll only be 21 at the time. You end up with this weapon that you can play all over the floor. I mean, I think even at the minimum, he could develop into like a pick and pop 7-footer that can attack closeout to make plays. I think at his potential, he could be a slimmer Jokic as far as just you can run the offense through him. You can put, pick and pops. He can space the floor and put the ball on the floor. But I think he has the potential to be a much better defender than Jokic. Like the kid is really talented. It's just the other things that I'm concerned about. But at the end of the day, he's still 18 years old, and it's just hard to predict or project what any 18-year-old is going to do.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Again, he is so young, and he would take a lot of time. He's a guy, again, I don't really think he's going to be there. If he is, I'd love to see the Spurs take him. I don't think they will tank or, try to rebuild as long as Pop is there, because I feel like they think they owe it to him to be competitive, and they do. But I think there's a way to still, if they take him, like you said, throw him in the G League, see how he responds. But that is tough. The G League is so, so tough. Those guys are hungry. And we saw them, they did a similar thing to Luka Šamanić this year. Another guy who the Spurs were really high on. They thought he has a lot of potential as a stretch big who might be able to put the ball on the floor a little bit. And he kind of struggled. I mean, he had some good games. He had some good showings here and there. But if you look at just like the counting numbers, like points per game and stuff like that, you might think, oh, he did really well. But his percentages were pretty bad. His turnovers were really high. And like I said, he had some good games, but for the most part, I think he struggled. And that's one of the things that worries me with guys who are so young, who don't have that first team experience, or if they do, they don't have a lot of it. They're not playing heavy minutes. Is they may not have what it takes mentally to now be thrust into this big role against guys who are going to come after them. I'm still holding out hope for Luka Šamanić. I think it would be foolish to give up on a guy who is still so young. But I think Spurs fans would have to come to terms with the idea of Šamanić and Pokusevski being in the G League at the same time, because as much as Spurs fans probably want to see Luka Šamanić play a big role, I don't think he's ready for it next year even. And we saw him in the year on a 16-point, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and
5 of 10 shooting.
That it's like, yes, he played well, but we played the Utah Jazz, who sat all of their starters, and he was essentially playing backups, G League level talent. Of course, he's going to look like he did in the G League. So, it would be an interesting pairing. It would be an interesting, 2 guys to see develop. I think it would be worth seeing that out. But whether they end up being that, great superstar player, hard to tell. Really, really hard to tell. And we'll go ahead and move on to these guys who I was sent, who are potential second rounders. I won't go through all 4 of them. Maybe we'll just cover a couple of them. I'm really biased here. My mom went to CU Boulder. I'm a big Buffs fan. Tyler Bay, I don't know that he will fall to the second round, but if he does, I think if he ends up falling that far, the Spurs got to take him. I really love his defensive tenacity. He's so long. He's got really good feet. I think he's one of the best defenders in the class. And I don't necessarily buy into the 3-point shot yet, because he didn't really have a high volume, even though it was like a 41%, I think he shot this year from deep. What do you think about him as a guy, really as a player? Who will he be able to come to the NBA and contribute right away, or is he another guy who probably will spend some time in the G League? I think he could contribute, but what do you think?
Oh yeah, I think he can contribute right away. He reminds me of a smaller Brandon Clark in a sense. I felt like too many teams passed on Brandon Clark.
Yep.
And I'm guessing they passed on him because of his age. They thought, 4-year guy, he's old. And nobody thought that Brandon Clark was going to shoot the ball the way he did this year. If I'm not mistaken, he made less than 5 3-pointers his entire college career. And then I remember the game in the bubble, he had like 5 threes or something like that. And so, but then again, since this, it's a Spurs, Spurs show, Taylor Jenkins is a Spurs guy. I remember Taylor when he was the coach of the Toros, and even when he was an assistant coach. And he has a developmental background. And whatever they did, I don't want to give the Grizzlies all the credit, because it did have to take Brandon Clark putting in the hours in the gym, but he developed into a really good shooter, which unlocked, he's already going to bring energy and activity and athleticism. And I think that Tyler Bay could have a similar impact. I think that, he reminds me of a poor man Sean Marion in a sense.
I've heard that before, yeah.
Yeah, there's only one Sean Marion.
Yeah.
And Sean Marion was ahead of his time as a 6'7", 4. But even with Sean Marion, he used to have seasons where he'd have like 100 steals, 100 blocks, and 100 threes. And I mean, you probably see a little bit more now. And I think that Bay could have a year where he makes 100 threes. He averages over a steal a game, and he's a good shot blocker. But what I like most about him is that he doesn't need the ball to be effective. Like, you don't have to give him his touches in order for him to give you maximum effort all over the floor. I think you can, get easy buckets from cutting, moving, activity, second chance points. I think in a switch heavy league, you can take advantage of him if there's a guard on him, because he has a background of a post player. He can post up smaller guards if there's a mismatch, and then he can also, like, if you have a mismatch where you got a guard on him, and then you have your point guard has a big and your point guard shoots, then I think that it's going to be tough for any small guard or point guard to box him out. He'll give you second chance opportunities with his activities. So I really like him a lot. I think that he's a plug and play guy. I am going to buy into him being a at least league average 3-point shooter over time. He didn't have a high volume of attempts, but I feel like with him and obviously everybody else in this draft, they play their last game in like March. As of today, they're saying that they think the 2021 season may start on like Martin Luther King Day. Yeah. So that is what, 9 months to just work on your weakness.
Yeah.
And so it's like 2 off seasons in a sense for these guys entering the draft. Now they are going to be rusty because they haven't really played competitive basketball. But yeah, I mean, I think like if he's been in the gym, like if I were in charge of his development, he's making 300 corner threes every day, just kind of getting used to getting up a ton of shots, because he's not going to get post touches like he did in college. So in order for him to be really, really effective as a rookie, he's going to have to knock down open shots. But then, all the other stuff comes natural to him, running the floor and rebounding, all of that. So I like him a lot. I definitely am buying into him being like a very productive NBA player.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear, because I kind of have a little bit of a Buffalo bias there. And I love seeing CU play basketball. I loved watching him play basketball at CU. He was one of my favorite players that I've seen come through there. And I'm sure it's kind of a lazy comparison, but he kind of reminds me of Andre Roberson, where he's going to give you maximum effort regardless of how involved he is in the offense. Mm-hmm. And, Spurs could use a lot of those guys because they have so many guys who need touches right now. DeMar, LaMarcus, DeJounte, Derek White. Derek White can play off ball a little bit, but they in the bubble, they made him kind of their lead guard. And I anticipate them continuing that trend into next year. And the last guy who we'll talk about is someone who I actually haven't seen much of at all, Jay Scrubb. So what can you tell me about him? I'd love to learn more about him, and fans asked about him, so I'd love to hear your opinion. What do you think of him? What does he bring to the table? And is he even somebody who should be on draft radars? Because I honestly don't know much about him.
Yeah, I mean, he went to junior college. I think most people know about him at the junior college, so you have to question like the level of competition. Mm-hmm. But he was a guy that I think he committed to Louisville, and he had some grade issues, maybe like a learning disability, if I'm not mistaken, which hurt him being able to qualify. But he has a great body, great size, 6'7". I want to say his numbers declined a little bit this year, but his first year he shot over like 40% from 3 on a pretty decent volume. He is very athletic. Like I said, he has 6'7", strong frame, broad shoulders. He's a lob threat. You can throw lobs for him. I think right now at this point, he's I forgot who I had a comparison to, but he's a very good shooter when his feet are set. He's another guy that I wouldn't be shocked to see a team develop in the G League, just because he doesn't have a lot of high level competition. I'm looking at my notes. He shot 46% from 3 his first year out.
Okay. That's impressive. Yeah.
He's a good rebounder also. Like he's active, he's tough. But then again, you wonder how is that all going to translate against much better competition. I mean, just watching the film last year, he looked like a man amongst boys because he was just as big as, if not bigger than, a lot of the post players in that league. So he was able to just kind of dominate just off of pure physicality and athletic skills. But he did have the shooting behind it. I think the numbers declined this year. I don't know them off the top of my head, but it's tough to shoot 46% again. So, but yeah, I think he's a guy that I would definitely develop in the G League. I don't know if he's ready to compete right away just because there's a huge gap in competition. I'd be interested to see if the Spurs would have an interest in him, simply because they have a lot of wings and it would be very redundant. I mean, you got Keldon Johnson, who I think is going to, have a prominent role next year. You still got Lonnie Walker, probably obviously DeRozan if he decides to come back. So I don't know if they'd be interested in him. And also, and I don't know if I should say this, but if there is like a learning disability, if there is like some issues there, I think it could be tough because I think the San Antonio kind of runs like a complex system in a sense, especially defensively. And that could possibly be an issue. I wonder like how, like if they do like these tests and how well he'll do. I'm not, man, I want to say it was dyslexia, if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to be wrong, but I know there was something that he has some issues with that are the reasons why he didn't qualify. So I wonder, would that be held against him? Is it fair? I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, is it fair to hold that against him? It's tough, but so he had a learning disability, and
they didn't specify. Didn't specify on there though.
No, it doesn't. But I want to say I read somewhere that it may be dyslexia.
And that would be tough. Be wrong. That's something that's definitely tough to overcome. I'm sure they figure out a way to make it work. But yeah, he's just somebody who I was curious about because Spurs fans want to know about him and wanted to see what you knew about him. And we'll kind of wrap things up here. I wanted to ask you just two questions. That's all I got left for you. The first one is the guy who you just mentioned a second ago, Lonnie Walker. I think Spurs fans went a little bit sour on him at the end of the year because of how well Keldon Johnson played in the bubble. Keldon shot 65% from three in the bubble. It's not going to happen next year. For me, he's a guy who's probably realistically going to shoot closer to 35-ish%. We saw in the G League on 2 attempts for a really large sample size there. He only shot 25% on 2 attempts. So I think he's probably closer to 35-ish% now that he's not really shooting off the dribble. He's just pretty much a standstill catch and shoot guy. But I think Lonnie Walker's a guy who I still have a lot of faith in. I've seen him add to his game since he came to San Antonio. Is he someone who you think could potentially develop into, a first option scorer, not necessarily your best player on a good team, but somebody who can put points on the board, say someone 18, 20 points per game? Or is he just somebody who can get hot and cold every once in a while and he'll pretty much always come off the bench? Because that's what, some people think.
Oh, that's tough. Because I remember watching him in college. I felt like, man, this dude is talented. Like he can fill it up. But then he didn't look good. And so I thought, okay, I know he suffered like an ankle injury early in that season. So I kind of thought like, all right, the reason why he's not as productive as you think that his talent suggests is because he wasn't 100%. But I still kind of feel that way after his second year in the league. Like, he shows flashes of being able to be like this guy that you think could be a number one option. And then there's times where you wonder like his fit or his role. I think Keldon Johnson has more so of a defined role to where if you have that, superstar number one option, I think Keldon Johnson is a better complementary piece. And for Walker, I think that he has to figure out a way to either, I don't know, like, I don't think he's a really good complementary piece. Like if you put him on the floor with a ball dominant, guard, can he complement him? Does he shoot it well enough? I know the numbers say he shot 40% from three this year, but just looking at the raw numbers, he shot 40% from three for his career in 2 years. But I don't necessarily see him as a shooter. Is he good enough to be a number one option or number two option? I don't know. I mean, to me, that's like a really tough question.
Sure.
But he's still young. He's only 21. I don't think you give up on him at this point. And yeah, I don't know. And it just seems like there's so many guards there, or so many wings, that somebody's going to be the odd man out. I think Keldon Johnson is going to have a much bigger role.
Yeah, I think somebody is
the odd man out.
Yeah, somebody has definitely got to go there. I love all those guys, but there's nothing personal. Somebody's just got to go. I really do like Lonnie Walker. I do buy into his shot. I think he has a really quick release, a pretty form actually. I think he has a really good looking shot. And I know it's a small sample size. He didn't really play much. This year might as well have been his rookie year. Last year I think he played maybe 15, 20 games in the NBA, spent most of it in the G League. But when I saw him play in the Summer League, and the Summer League obviously is not NBA competition, it's closer to G League competition. He just looked like that dude who had it, right? He was averaging 24 points per game in the Summer League, a few assists, 4 or 5 rebounds, and his percentages were like 50, 40, 85. I mean, it looked good. He looked confident. And then he came into this year and immediately was benched for Marco Bellinelli. And I think he's one of those guys who is a little bit easily thrown off his rhythm. And I think that actually played a pretty big role in how the season ended up, transpiring for him. Marco was awful this year. Marco shot about 37%, played some of the worst defense on the roster, maybe in the NBA. Clearly to me at this point, not an NBA player. Love him. I'm happy that he was part of that 2014 championship team. But it was just hard to see him play behind somebody like that all year. He would come in. There was a game where he was defending Harden and he let Harden get by him and Pop yanked him immediately and replaced him with Marco. And after that, we didn't see him for like 5-6 games. He was just on the bench, not in the G League, just on the bench. Then he came back, got a chance to start. And then he had this game where he had an opportunity to attack the rim. It was right there. And he ended up passing out to somebody who wasn't open, and Pop yanked him again. Like he chewed him out, yanked him. And I don't know that he responds that well to like that tough love that, that brand that Pop, it's his signature brand. He's a tough love guy. He's going to tell you how it is. I don't think he necessarily responded that well to it. I'd like to see how he comes back this year, what he's added. Because in the bubble, I saw him make some really impressive hammer passes. I saw him make some really impressive bounce passes in transition and some nice shovel passes to Pirtle. And I just thought that's something we didn't really see a lot of at Miami. Maybe a new dynamic to his game. Can he continue to build on that? And you're right. He didn't play a very good complementary role to primary ball handlers. He really did struggle in the bubble. I'll tell it how it is. He did not play great in the bubble, but I do hold out hope for him. I hope he does well. We'll see how he develops. He's just 21, turning 22. We'll see how that happens. Now, you did talk about Keldon Johnson. That was the last guy I wanted to talk about. So you say he's a good complementary player. Do you think he can be more than that? Because a lot of Spurs fans do think at the moment, they saw him play so well in the bubble. They think this is the guy who's the next guy. And I'm not there. I don't really see it. I think he's a good spot up shooter. He's a really tenacious defender. He's not scared of any challenge. What do you think he is someone who can be more than that complementary piece, or is that probably his role going forward?
Well, one, you have to look at like Kentucky guards, and they usually do pretty well in the NBA. Yeah. And he, you look at Hero, you look at Gilgeous-Alexander. I mean, other than Kevin Knox, who's not necessarily a guard, but most of the guys have looked better. They've had a chance to really show more of their skill set in the NBA than college. I think that if I had to choose between the two, I think Keldon Johnson is the better player, even though they're very close in age. I think they're both 21 at this point. But if you look at like Lonnie from Miami to his first 2 years in the NBA, or I guess 1 year and throw in some games his official rookie year, he just hasn't been efficient. It's always 40%. And I think it's tough for guys in today's NBA. If you're not going to be an efficient scorer and you need shots, then I think it's just going to be tough because you can't be an inefficient ISO player. You either have to be a knockdown shooter, which, looking at Lonnie's numbers throughout his, I think he took like 101 threes last year. He made 41%. So the numbers suggest that he's good. It's still hard for me to see him as just a spot up shooter. Well, I think Johnson can play that role very well. And then I want to say, like, his ceiling to me, and this could get me in trouble, but his ceiling to me was Bradley Beal.
For Lonnie?
If you no, Keldon Johnson.
For Keldon Johnson, okay.
If you get Bill, then it's definitely a win, because I remember, like, in my opinion, Bill came into the league with a reputation as a spot up shooter, but he added so much to his game to where he became, able to, like, play in pick and rolls, make plays for others. And I think that's Johnson's ceiling. So yes, I do think that he could end up developing into a number one option. And I thought the Spurs did a good job of kind of, like, letting him develop and get better as a player than throwing him out to the Wolves. And I think it's more so because they were still trying to compete. I think if he goes to another organization, they throw him out there because of where he was drafted. And, they play him at least 20 minutes a game. And I think if you play him that amount of minutes, I think he could have been like an all rookie pick. So, but yeah, I think next year is the breakout year for him. I'm just throwing it out there. I can see him averaging 15 points a game next year. He's on my list of guys that could be potential most improved players on my most improved player list. I think Keldon Johnson is high on that list. I would not be shocked to see him have a breakout year.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. I think he could easily average double digits next year. I think at the moment, Pop is higher on him than he is on Lonnie. We heard him praise Keldon a ton in the bubble, even gave him the nickname, the Mustang. Lonnie has no nickname right now. He pretty much is either, in the doghouse on the bench, or he's hot and he's scoring, 15, 16, maybe 20 points when he's really hot. And I like both guys. I really like Keldon. I really like Lonnie. I think Keldon, one of the things that makes me not hesitant, but really encourages me to say that he will be a very good player down the road is his ability to get to the free throw line. And I'm not sure where you are on that, like your opinions on that, but for Keldon Johnson, even in the G League, and you combine it with his NBA numbers, even if you want to separate them, his free throw rate was near the same level, and obviously small sample size, but where we saw like Giannis and Jimmy Butler's, like he was drawing like 8 to 10 fouls per like 100 possessions, which is crazy to me. And he's a guy who's just not afraid of contact. He embraces it. He seeks it out even. And those guys who can get to the line, get easy points that way because he is a pretty good free throw shooter. Those are guys who I think have a really good chance to continue to become like these, foundational pieces because you can ask them to go get points. We watched Jimmy Butler get to the line a bunch in the finals where, how did he score, 40, but he only took like 15, 16 shots while he's getting to the line.
No threes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's just like, when you look at Keldon, maybe that's not where he is right now, but he has some indicators that suggest he may become really, really good down the line. So I'm excited. Again, thank you so much for coming out. I loved hearing everything you had to say. It's nice to have some insight. It's great to have someone who, has experience in the field, who knows what they're talking about. And it was just awesome to hear you say everything you said. Really great time with you. But this is your time to shine, so you can shout out anything you want. You can tell the people where they can find your work, whether it be writing, YouTube, anything. It's your time.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. Anytime you want me on as a guest to talk draft, Spurs, I'm all in for it. So, again, thank you for reaching out to me. I've enjoyed this. I don't know if you had a time limit on it, but I could go on for another hour or two. So that's how much I've enjoyed it. But yeah, I mean, you can find me at NBADraftJunkies.com. You can type it in on YouTube. I have a lot of video content out there. My goal is to make at least 60 prospect videos for this draft class. And then, for like the last few months, I've been interviewing people, or I've given like my subscribers an opportunity to come on my show and talk about their big board and just what they see. So that's been pretty fun. Just, like hearing other people's thoughts. So it's usually me doing the interviewing. So it's kind of interesting that I'm on the other side of it. So, but again, thank you for having me on. But yeah, NBA Draft Junkies. I'm on Twitter, Barlowe 500, BARLOWE 500. And then just yesterday, I signed I didn't sign it, but I had my first show on Dash Radio, which is a internet radio. I guess the competition is Sirius Radio. And I have an NBA Draft Junkie show that airs at 10 a.m. every Monday, 10 a.m. Central every Monday. And it'll be similar to like what's on my YouTube channel and what's on my my NBA Draft Junkies podcast. But talking NBA Draft, now that the season is officially over, it's officially draft season. So, this is like my favorite time of the year.
Yep. I mean, it is one of my favorite times of the year too. It's a lot to be excited about. All these new players coming in the league. Again, so great to have you on the show with me. And I'll put all of your information, all the ats, all the follows, YouTube information, the link. It'll be in the description so people can find you, because they definitely need to be watching out for your content. Great stuff. And again, just thank you so much for coming on, taking time to hang out with me here.
Yeah, when I say anytime, I mean I really mean that. A lot of people just say it, but no, I'm serious. Like I said, I've enjoyed it, and your stuff. And so I really like talking to people who follow basketball just as much as I do. There's like the guys that know basketball, and then there's the guys that like love it. And so, you do a lot of, like actually when you reached out to me, I started like reading your stuff, and you do a great job. Just you're very knowledgeable about the Spurs, the players, and just basketball overall. Like when you mentioned Hammer Pass, I was like, you know what? What's the first person that I've spoken to that is like, breaking it down that deep? And like the Hammer is like a very prominent player in the Spurs offense. So
yeah.
But yeah, man, I've enjoyed it. So whenever you want to have me on, just reach out to me and we can make it happen.
For sure. And, I take all those compliments with a ton of pride. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you again for coming on. And Spurs fans, if y'all want to check out any draft content, this is the go-to guy. Amazing stuff over at Draft Junkies. And, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. What do y'all want to see in the future? Who are you interested in looking at? Do you want a film study? Do you want, draft prospect review? What do y'all want? Because this channel is for the fans as much as it is for me. But don't forget to follow Draft Junkies. Go check that channel out. Super awesome. And we'll catch you next time, Spurs fans.